is launching a new organization called Stop the Scalpings, which intends to challenge what he argues is an attack on conservative media figures, radio hosts, television hosts, launched by organizations like Media Matters, which I think is backed by George Soros and others, and that they are just taking conservatives off the air by means of boycotts and et cetera. And then at the bottom of the hour, I will be joined by Heather McDonald, who is a Manhattan Institute scholar. She is the author of the book called The War on Cops. Heather was invited by a conservative club to speak at the Claremont McKenna University campus. And what unfolded there in the course of her speech is something that one would not expect to happen in this country. It was just a complete, like a fascistic, like shout down with to the point where she had to be escorted off the campus, and she ended up having to deliver her speech in a locked room where it was streamed live. She couldn't even appear, apparently, in front of people. So we'll hear that directly from Heather. And I guess that the organization that's behind it, at least among many, is called Antifa, which is anti-fascist. It's the same old people. I mean, this is the same people who, with the knitted caps and the, the little gray, ponytails. They sit around and they protest on the drop of a hat. Except they've become violent, and I think that it's my custom as a radio talk show host, and I don't think I'm going to do it here at Tufts. I think I'm probably going to do this one just on my podcast, because I have to be very careful here because I'm under investigation by the anti-bias police on the campus. So, I mean, I can control what I say, but I can't necessarily control what someone else says, and they might say something that could get me in trouble and get me thrown off the air. Not that I won't get thrown off anyway, but I don't want to, welcome that. Hello, you're on the air. Hello, you're on the air. Thanks for joining me.
Chuck.
Yes.
Oh, Chuck. Hi, it's Brian Maloney.
Hi, Brian. I just introduced you. Thanks for joining me. You're starting up Stop the Scalpings. You're the editor of Media Equalizer, longtime radio guy, formerly WRKO. Brian, talk a little bit about what this is about, what your group doing.
Well, what we're doing here, and I appreciate you having me on today, really do. It's a pleasure. And, really what we're trying to say here is that we've had enough, and you've worked in the media a long time, and you know what it's like behind the scenes. I mean, there's a constant push behind the scenes to undermine, eliminate, water down opinions that are anything other than the far left. And I think that that's where we've drawn the line, and that, we've said that enough is enough. I mean, we at least had one channel, and apparently the left can't allow us to even have that. And now we're seeing that internal battle from within and these pressure campaigns to remove conservative hosts from Fox. And so what we've done is we've begun a group called Stop the Scalpings, and the name is kind of intentionally provocative. We're intentionally really trying to anger the other side because it's kind of can be enjoyable at times. And so the idea behind that is that the left has a habit of claiming scalps. So it's not enough to have someone disagree with you and oppose them and debate them. You have to tear them down. You have to remove them and eliminate them. And so what we've said is no more scalps. And and we're consistent on that. We don't think that Stephen Colbert should be kicked off the air either. We can denounce what he says. We can oppose what is being done, but we don't necessarily have to remove everyone we don't like from the air.
No, we don't, but at the same time, that's how they play the game. I mean, you're quite right. They don't want to debate people. They don't want to get into issues. They try to destroy the opposition. That's what the left does. And so, therefore, it kind of raises the question that maybe if that's the field of battle, why come disarmed? Maybe we should go after Colbert, demand he goes off the air, sue him, bring boycotts, send troops out on the street and stop mugging people like they do.
Yeah, well, it's a great debate to have. To me, I just think that if we're saying that we want to stop the scalpings, we don't want to scalp them either. We just want a divergence. We want different views out there. But you're right. I mean, the question is with him is, it's a vile commentary, and we could certainly stand up and scream. But it is true. I mean, Sean Hannity or anyone on Fox would never get away with saying those kinds of things on the air. And, if you substitute one president for the last one that we had, and you say something like that, I mean, the media, there'd be a firestorm for weeks about it. So I think that, we're fed up. And so Maloney Morgan, who is also a former talk show host and also a former Fox News Channel guest, so her and I have both been on many Fox News Channel shows in the past. We'll see if we're ever on there again, because it's been kind of annoying the top brass there this week, which is just fine with me right now. But so Maloney is also a former host, and so the two of us just started talking about the situation, and we were aware of some inside information, things that were rumblings that were going on inside of Fox, and we just started chatting. And so it was just 1 week ago that we hatched this plan to start this new group called Stop the Scalpings, which if you look on Facebook or Twitter, just use hashtag Stop the Scalpings, one word, and you can take a look and see what we're doing. And in just a week, our new fledgling political organization has attracted 3,500 members, which to me, out of
That's
1 week,
huge.
and it was word of mouth. Until 2 days ago, it was word of mouth, and now we're getting a lot of publicity. And then Sean Hannity started retweeting and linking back to us, and so we got a lot more attention from that. So the thing has taken off, and there are some fairly prominent people that are among those members too, broadcasters and people that have Monica Crowley and others who have endorsed us. So I mean, it just took off like a rocket in just in a moment, and we never could have expected. So we've been scrambling to try to keep up with.
Right.
Next time I guess I would have a plan ahead of time. I figured it would be months. I didn't think it would be days. So
no, I mean, you guys are on a roll. And by the way, I want to mention, I'm not advocating that we go out and protest. I mean, I'm just suggesting that we ought to think about it, since that's how they play ball. And I should mention to you, Brian, that my program, even here at this small station, I've already been notified that the anti-bias police are monitoring me. And there's already been an article about me throwing some pretty hard rocks at me. So I want to be careful. I'm not advocating anything like protests.
Right.
I'm just simply suggesting that that's how the other guys do it. Now, Brian, I mentioned just before you came on that I kind of wondered out loud whether or not this effort, how concerted it is, how organized it is to knock out anyone who doesn't genuflect to the left. And Media Matters, I think, has come up as an organization that might be behind some of this. That's George Soros's turf group. What can you tell us about that?
Well, that's the problem. I mean, they are well funded on the left. I mean, they have tens of millions of dollars at their disposal for these efforts. And Media Matters has been funded by billionaire financier, currency destroyer George Soros for many, many years. And the fact is that on the conservative end, we have, duct tape and rubber bands and paper clips, and, we try to put together groups with that. And that's about all we have. And on their side, they have mountains of money. So, and when conservative groups do get money, it ends up misallocated. There are people in D.C. who steal it or whatever. It just, we don't have what they have. And so what happens is we're always on the wrong end of these things. That's why we lose most of the battles, and that's what's going on right now. So, a couple of us just try to do what we can to fight back on almost on a lark, or we've put together many political groups before. We've been involved in politics for, decades each, but we also know how daunting a task this can be up next to them. They're really organized, and, they also have, they have rabid support on social media networks. So when they go after somebody, Sean Hannity's lucky to still be on the air today. Trust me, he really is, given what's going on up against him right now.
Yeah, he's already had to hire a staff of lawyers, and it's they're out with like the pitchforks to try to take him down.
Right.
I'm surprised they never really put a finger on Rush Limbaugh either. But
Well, the difference is, they've come pretty close to removing Rush many times. And the difference, well, first of all, you were mentioning Sean and his lawyer. So what he did essentially was he put together a war room where he could fight back. So as soon as he heard that O'Reilly was removed from Fox, he put together a team of lawyers and just pitbulls and everything he could gather in 24 hours and just filled a room with people. So he realized that he saw all the mistakes that Bill O'Reilly made, which was just to kind of sit there and let him, he just kind of allowed himself to go down in flames. And, he's a whole different ballgame. But in terms of Rush, they've come very close to removing Rush in the past. And the bottom line is that he owns his radio program, and it's harder to get rid of him. So it's a different situation. There's the control issue, whereas Sean O'Reilly or anyone on Fox is still under the control of 21st Century Fox, and the younger Murdochs have now taken control.
Yeah,
and that's the difference. The younger Murdochs are liberals. Rupert Murdoch wasn't necessarily so much a conservative, but he's more of a businessman, and he has always seen the profit in catering to conservatives. He's seen that it's lucrative, it gets ratings, it brings revenue, whereas the younger Murdochs are guided by ideology. I don't know how bright they are, and then their spouses are, calling the shots, and they're hanging out at parties in the Upper East Side. It's just in the Hamptons, and it's a snooty little scene they have going there, and they're part of that, and their friends at their parties say, how can you have someone like, Sean Hannity on your channel? And so that's what this is really all about.
They want to be one of the beautiful people. Brian Maloney's my guest. Stop the Scalpings is the organization. You can check them out online. Brian, what do you think is going to happen to Fox? I mean, after all, their whole brand has been that they're the one station that has not been 100% left wing. Are they going to start losing in the market share?
Well, that's exactly right, because what's happened is they spent 20 plus years building that brand, and now they're just torpedoing it overnight, and that is because there's an internal campaign of destruction, there's an external campaign of destruction from the left. So you have, like you said, the brand being tarnished. And I've been doing a lot of interviews this week, and I've been telling people that, to me, it's like playing, you've got a country music station, you start playing classical on it, and then you wonder why the listeners change the dial, change the station. And that's really what it is. So you start putting programming on there that doesn't suit what that audience wants. They go, they're angry, they leave, and I think that that would go for, and I always use the music analogies because people have a hard time understanding, well, what's the big deal if you put on some liberal shows or whatever? And then I just say, well, take your favorite hard rock station and put 2 hours of jazz in the middle of the day, and are you going to tune in?
Right.
And you're not, and you know it. So that's the easy way for people to relate to it. The people are looking for programming that interests them, just like people listen to NPR or whatever who are on the left. And that's what they like. People have what they like. And for some reason in society now, you can't have views that are opposing yours. You have to eliminate them. And it's a sick and sad thing. I mean, here you are in this academic college environment there. I don't know how you survived doing a show there.
Yeah, it's like, I'm like the fiddler on the roof, One good gust of wind is going to knock me to my death.
I would want to hear the story how you even got a show on there, because I can't believe there aren't pitchforks outside right now. I mean,
they didn't quite know who I was at first. Now they do. They've already written an article calling me racist and other names.
Oh, great!
Brian, the talk radio is generally a conservative medium because people don't want to hear liberalism on the air. That's been proven over and over again. Nobody wants to be driving around and listening to someone tell them they need to raise taxes or, more regulation or a weak, position in the world or any of these other leftist positions. So, your average person likes conservative talk. That's just a fact. And radio stations are money-making entities, and they're going to put on the air whatever makes a profit. So I don't know how they're going to, they can't force this. I mean, it's just not going to happen. I mean, no left host has really ever made it.
Well, you've worked in radio for a long time. I have as well. And you've probably seen more than one programmer come through the door at one of the stations you worked at who decided that he didn't like the conservative politics or whatever, and he was going to do something about it, or he was going to, or could have been a music station, and I don't like the bands we're playing, we're going to start playing these ones instead. And when you play what you like, what happens is, and you think that you can force people to keep listening. The truth is you can't. And you can't make people read your newspaper either. You can't make people look at your website. You can't shove your views down people's throats. And I think, in a college campus environment where you have a real bubble, you have kids coming of age now who think that, we'll just force everyone to think as we do, but you can't.
Yeah.
You can't.
Well, I was here.
You can holler and riot, but you can't.
Yeah, and it's like people are, I don't like to use the word brainwashed, but I would say conditioned, not just by the college, but even by their upbringing, so that when they hear me talk about and do a critical analysis of how the left has damaged and been destructive to the African-American community going back about a half a century, they think that I've got something against black people. I mean, that's how they hear that. They're not used to... Yep.
Yeah. You have one radio show, and you're speaking to students right now who go through an entire day of courses where one professor after another, one student after another, one administrator after another is essentially saying anyone that, is anywhere away from these views right here is a racist. So you're one show, and look what you're up against. And I just, I give you a lot of credit for getting in there and getting his voice in, but it's, opposition voices on campus now have almost been completely extinguished. And so, I look at my son, he's 16, and I think he's heading to college soon, and I think, wow, do I even want to send him? He's so bright, and he's so intelligent, and I think I'm going to pay money to send him into this rabid political environment where there really isn't learning anymore. There really is just regurgitating an ideology, and that's sad.
It's become a soapbox, but your son is well versed in what's really going on, much more so than your average student arriving at college. He knows what to expect. Whereas you get these young people going in who they're like putty, Anyway, Brian Maloney.
They didn't. Yeah.
I want to thank you for joining me. Stop the Scalpings, Brian. Let me know where people can get more information about you and your group.
Well, the best thing to do is either on Twitter or Facebook, just do #StopTheScalpings, one word, #StopTheScalpings. You'll find us easy enough that way. That's how I recommend it. And thanks again, Chuck.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, take care. Brian Maloney is with Stop the Scalpings. He is a longtime media critic, former WRKO guy. It's a media equalizer. Let's see. I'm going to try after any media figure, any commentator who doesn't genuflect to the left. And his group is, he's also the editor of Media Equalizer. And shortly we'll be joined by Heather McDonald. She is the author of The War on Cops. She's a Manhattan Institute fellow, a longtime conservative scholar, writer of columns and books. And she recently had a rather ugly experience, which would have otherwise been routine, speaking at the Claremont McKenna College in California. We're going to talk with her about what exactly happened there and how this is a reflection of what's going on. I think that I keep hearing people tell me that these sorts of protests, and the one against Ann Coulter and Milo Yiannowitch at the University of California, Berkeley, it's being done by so-called outside agitators, as we used to say back in the 60s. And I think that is half true. That's true that the so-called outside agitators, groups, the Antifa, so-called, they're, who knows who they are? That's an interesting question. I think it's the same old communist groups that have always been around. I don't know if there's anything new there. They might be more energized now that President Trump is in office. No question about that. And when Obama was in office, they were a little bit more subdued because they probably sensed that Obama was their guy. So let's not make too much noise. Let's hold off. Now they're out on the street. But I think that it's also true, and equally true, that the students on campus are fairly organized on the left, and fairly able to suppress opposition. I'll just bring this up briefly, and I just wrote an article about it that will be hopefully next week up on Newsmax, and that is the situation right here at our very own Tufts University, where on the eve of Passover, the Student Senate voted in secret to boycott the state of Israel. Now, I don't want to go too much into it because I know the anti-bias police are listening. But I will suffice it to say that that vote, which was taken in secret, which is unusual, by the way, coincided two international incidences that were not commented on by the Senate of Tufts and were ignored. I'm not going to say what they were. You can look at the newspapers and find out for yourself. But the fact is, and I also applaud the Tufts University administration for coming out against that and saying no thank you. And for Jonathan Greenblatt, a Tufts University graduate, now the national head of the Anti-Defamation League, who came out against it while he accepted an honorary degree or an award of some sort on the campus. So the college has done the right thing. That's not the question. The question is, how is it that some left-wing group was able to do this and do it in the cloak of secrecy and get it done and get it over the plate? I mean, I suppose that maybe it's a good sign that they had to be so secretive because they know that, I would think, and I have no idea, I have no way of knowing this, my evidence is strictly anecdotal, but that the majority of students at Tufts University do not support that. And that's why they had to operate with such a cloak of secrecy. But I bring it up only because these are leftist agendas, and they've always been around. I mean, I remember back in the 1970s when my brother was a student at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and there was all this political ferment. I was out there. I was walking around. You had left wing and right wing, and everybody was out. But you didn't have this level of authority where the left really controlled the high ground and the argument, and they were really in a position where they could silence dissent and even destroy it. And by the way, that's what Brian Maloney's talking about in the national media right now. They are silencing anyone who dissents from the leftist perspective. Now, while I wait for Heather McDonald to join me, and that should be in a few minutes, and I'm not going to read from my article directly, but I will just say that my article about the BDS situation at Tufts, the boycott Israel situation, it's not about Tufts. I just mentioned that only as the entree to the article. I get into, in a more broad sense, in a more philosophical sense, exactly why the enemies of Israel have been successful to a certain degree in their marketing campaign to destroy Israel, and that marketing campaign is entirely aimed at the left because conservatives are not interested. Conservatives support Israel. So don't most liberals. We're talking left of liberal here. That the BDS campaign is specifically set up to target those people, to bring them in, to sell to them this idea that there's some virtue in boycotting Israel. Now, I'm not going to get into the complexities of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinian Arabs. That's a big subject. I'll say one thing about it, and that is that every time Israel tries to help the Palestinian Authority develop some kind of a governing infrastructure, the Palestinian Authority takes most of the money both from the Israelis and internationally. And instead they spend it on paying families of people who go in and slaughter Jews. And if you kill 2 Jews, you get more money. If you kill 3 Jews, you get even more. So, they're not exactly operating in a way that would encourage the development of a peaceful and prosperous and democratic Palestinian Arab entity, even if that were a good idea. And I think to a certain extent it would be a good idea theoretically. But instead, their leadership is engaged in war against Israel. I mean, they're just they're paying people to go in and kill Israelis. And so, this is something that we ought to consider when our students are involving themselves in condemning the state of Israel. But the topic of my article is more why it is that that an anti-Israel position would be something that left-wing students particularly, but leftists generally, internationally, why it is that they would embrace that. After all, if you look at this thing objectively, Israel is probably the most democratic society. It is the most democratic society in the Middle East in terms of individual rights, rights for women, rights for gay people, rights for minorities, rights for it's multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multiracial. And so why is it that they would specifically target Israel? I mean, that's the question.